poor farmer hid a wounded princess. Then the chief paid off all his ranch debts. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. In the heart of the vast plains, a poor farmer named Ethan lived a simple life. His ranch was small and struggling, barely able to survive the harsh seasons. Every day felt like a battle against time, as his crops withered under the unforgiving sun and his livestock grew thinner. With every passing month, the debt collectors were getting closer, and the weight of financial ruin was pressing down on him. He lived alone, with no family to turn to for help and no one to share the burden. One cold evening, as Ethan was finishing his work in the fields, he heard a faint cry carried by the wind. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but then he heard it again, clearer this time. It was the sound of someone in distress. Without hesitation, he followed the cry into the woods that bordered his land. The trees stood tall and dark, casting long shadows in the moonlight. It was there, among the thicket, that he found her, a young woman, badly wounded and lying unconscious by the side of a creek. Her clothes were torn, and blood stained her skin. She had clearly been through something terrible. Ethan's heart raced. He had never seen anyone like her. Her features were delicate, her face marked with both beauty and the pain of a long journey. Despite his own struggles, he knew he couldn't leave her there to die alone. He carefully lifted her in his arms, ignoring the burning ache in his back, and carried her back to his small cabin. He laid her gently on his bed, covered her with blankets, and began to tend to her wounds with the few supplies he had. Hours passed before she stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She was weak, but her gaze was sharp, full of curiosity and fear. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice raspy from dehydration and pain. "I'm just a farmer," Ethan replied softly. "You're safe here." The woman didn't respond at first, but she studied him closely, as though trying to read his intentions. The tension in the room was thick with uncertainty. Ethan wasn't sure who she was or what she had been through, but he knew one thing for certain. He had to help her. The next few days passed in a blur as Ethan cared for her. She regained her strength slowly, but she still seemed distant, hesitant to speak about her past. All she would say was that she was running from something dangerous, but she refused to elaborate further. As the days wore on, Ethan couldn't help but feel a growing connection with her. He had never been one for idle conversation, but her presence filled the silence in his lonely life. There was something about her, something he couldn't quite place. It was only when she had recovered enough to stand and walk that she finally revealed her identity. She was a princess, the daughter of a powerful chief from a distant tribe. She had been ambushed and left for dead by a group of rogue warriors who sought to overthrow her father's rule. Ethan was taken aback. A princess? It seemed almost impossible. But the more she spoke, the more he realized the truth in her words. She was a woman of strength, far beyond what he could have ever imagined. As the days turned into weeks, the reality of her situation became even clearer. Ethan had no idea how he could help her escape her pursuers, but he vowed to protect her at all costs. Little did he know, his act of kindness was about to change his life forever. Days passed, and with each one, Ethan's bond with the wounded princess grew stronger. As she regained her strength, they began to speak more, and though she remained cautious, there was an undeniable connection between them. Despite the uncertainty of her situation, there was something comforting about having someone else around. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel so alone. The days were filled with small conversations, laughter, and even the occasional quiet moment when they sat together, the sun setting behind the mountains. But Ethan knew this peace couldn't last. The rogue warriors who had attacked her were still out there, and the threat they posed was growing stronger every day. Ethan didn't have much. His ranch was small, and he barely had enough food to keep himself fed, let alone protect someone of her importance. But he wasn't about to turn her away. He had made a promise, and he was determined to keep it. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the princess, whose name he had learned was Alara, finally opened up more about her past. She told him of her father's tribe, a powerful and respected group, but one now in turmoil. Her father, the chief, had been betrayed by his closest allies, and the rogue warriors who had attacked her were part of a plot to seize power. Alara had narrowly escaped the attack on her life, and now she had nowhere to go. She needed help, someone who could protect her and guide her to safety. Ethan listened intently, his heart aching for her. He knew that helping her wasn't just a matter of survival. It was about doing what was right. And in that moment, he realized that he could no longer live in isolation. The farm, the quiet life he had built for himself, was no longer enough. He had a chance to make a real difference in the world, to stand up against injustice. But just as he began to form a plan, the sound of hooves in the distance reached his ears. His stomach twisted in fear. He stood and walked to the edge of his property, peering into the distance. There, coming down the hill, were a group of men, riders, perhaps 10 of them, moving quickly, their horses kicking up dust as they approached. Ethan's heart raced. He couldn't be sure, but it looked like they were searching for something or someone. He turned quickly to Alara, who had already risen to her feet, her expression tense. "They're here," she whispered. Ethan felt a cold wave of dread wash over him. These were the men who had been hunting her. There was no mistaking the grim determination in their movements. He had to act fast. He grabbed his rifle, which was kept nearby for protection, and motioned for Alara to follow him. They hurried into the house, and Ethan locked the door behind them. Alara was already on edge, her eyes scanning the room nervously. "What will we do?" she asked, her voice strained. Ethan's mind raced. He had no idea what to do next. His options were limited, and the odds were stacked against them. But he knew one thing. He couldn't let these men find her. As the riders approached the house, Ethan held his breath, waiting for what seemed like an eternity. The men stopped just outside, their horses stamping impatiently. Ethan could hear their voices, low and harsh, as they spoke among themselves. One of them called out to him. "Open up, farmer," the voice demanded. "We're looking for a woman. A princess, to be exact. She's on your land, isn't she?" Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't respond, but he could feel the weight of their suspicion growing. There was no way out. The moment had come. He turned to Alara, who was standing silently by the door, her eyes wide with fear. This was it. There was no turning back. He had promised to protect her, and now he had to see it through. He made his decision in that instant. Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through his veins. "She's not here," he called out to the men. "I don't know what you're looking for, but she's not here. You've got the wrong place." For a long moment, there was silence on the other side of the door. Then, one of the men spoke again. "We'll be watching you, farmer. If she's here, we'll find her." The sound of hooves faded as the riders turned and began to ride off into the distance. Ethan exhaled, his breath shaky with relief. But he knew this wasn't over. They would be back. And when they did, he needed a plan. He had no idea how he was going to protect Alara from what was coming. But one thing was certain. He wasn't going to let her face this alone. Days passed, and the tension only grew. Ethan had barely slept since the riders had come to his ranch. Every creak of the old wooden floors, every rustle of the trees outside, had him on edge, constantly listening for any sign of their return. He knew it was only a matter of time before they would come back. The fear of being discovered weighed heavily on him. Meanwhile, Alara's presence in his home, once a source of quiet comfort, now seemed to intensify his worries. Despite the fear that loomed over them, Alara had begun to open up more. She would sit by the fire, her eyes distant, as if lost in thoughts of her homeland. She spoke of the world she came from, of her father's tribe, and of the betrayal that had shattered her life. Ethan listened intently, unable to fully grasp the magnitude of her story, but understanding the pain behind her words. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Alara turned to him, her face serious. "I need to go back," she said, her voice steady but filled with sadness. Ethan was taken aback. "Go back?" he asked, confused. "I have no choice," she replied softly. "My people need me. My father's tribe is in danger, and I cannot stay hidden forever. I must return, confront the traitors, and save my people." Ethan's heart sank at the thought of losing her. He had grown attached to her in ways he hadn't expected, but he knew she was right. She couldn't stay with him forever. Her destiny was far greater than anything he could offer her. I can't stop you, he said quietly. But you'll need help. I'm not letting you go back alone. Alara looked at him, her eyes searching his face. You would help me? She asked, her voice almost a whisper. You're the only one who's kept me safe, she continued. I owe you my life. But if you choose to stay here, it's too dangerous. The warriors will come for you next. Ethan knew what he had to do. He had no family left, no one to protect but himself. But something in him stirred when Alara spoke about her people, about the betrayal she had suffered. He couldn't stand by while she faced that alone. I'll go with you, he said firmly. We'll face this together. The decision was made. They would leave the ranch behind, and Ethan would follow Alara back to her people, wherever that might lead. They spent the next few days preparing for their journey. Ethan packed what little they could carry, while Alara gave him a small knife, a token of her tribe's trust. She explained its significance and the bond it represented between them. On the morning of their departure, the sky was overcast, and the wind had a chill to it. It felt like a warning, but neither of them hesitated. As they set out on horseback, the vast plains stretched before them, a landscape they had both known for years but now saw through different eyes. Ethan was no longer just a farmer. He was a protector, a traveler on a journey he could never have imagined just a few weeks ago. As they rode, the silence between them was comfortable, but there was an unspoken understanding. They were heading into danger, and there was no turning back. They rode for miles, crossing rivers and passing through dense forests, always keeping a watchful eye out for any signs of trouble. The world around them was beautiful, but it felt like a fleeting dream. They knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. As the days turned into weeks, their bond deepened. They shared stories of their past, their hopes, and their fears. Ethan learned more about Alara's tribe, the customs they followed, and the strength of her people. Alara, in turn, learned about Ethan's simple life on the farm, his struggles, and his determination to survive. But the shadows of danger never fully left them. The closer they got to her tribe, the more Ethan could feel the weight of their pursuit. The rogue warriors were still after Alara, and it was clear they were willing to do anything to stop her from returning to her people. As they approached the borders of her homeland, Alara grew quiet. Her mind seemed to be lost in thought, thinking about what awaited her. Ethan could sense the fear in her, but he also saw the strength that lay beneath it. She was ready to face whatever came next, but he wasn't sure if he was. The days of peace they had spent together on the ranch now felt like a distant memory, and the reality of what they were about to face was starting to settle in. He couldn't help but wonder if their journey would end in triumph or tragedy. The journey was far more dangerous than Ethan had anticipated. The landscape shifted as they crossed the last stretch of barren fields and approached the rugged mountains that bordered Alara's homeland. The air grew colder, and the trees grew denser, casting long shadows over the path. The closer they got to her people, the more Ethan could feel the weight of the pursuit that followed them. Alara's calm demeanor remained, but her eyes betrayed a hint of the deep fear she tried to conceal. They'll come for us, she said quietly one evening as they camped by a small stream. When they do, I won't be able to stop them. Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. You don't have to face them alone, he said firmly, his voice filled with resolve. Alara's lips parted, but no words came out. She seemed to be weighing his statement, but she didn't argue. Instead, she nodded. Thank you, she whispered, the simple words carrying more meaning than he could ever express. The days became a blur of travel as they pushed onward, their progress slow but steady. The mountains loomed ahead like silent sentinels, watching over the land. Ethan had heard stories about the tribal lands that lay beyond them, the ancient customs, the warriors, and the fierce loyalty of the people. But none of that prepared him for the sight of the village when they arrived. As they crested the final hill, Alara's eyes softened as she gazed down into the valley. There, nestled between the hills, was the heart of her tribe. It was a place that seemed to be at peace with nature, where the tall stone structures stood strong against the test of time. There were small fires burning in the distance, and the sound of drums echoed through the air, calling the people together. Ethan could feel his breath catch in his throat. It was beautiful, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Alara seemed to sense his unease. It's not what it used to be, she said softly, her voice tinged with sorrow. There is a great unrest within my people. The warriors who attacked me are not the only danger we face. There are others who want to tear our tribe apart from within. Ethan looked at her, his hand instinctively reaching for his rifle. He had never been in a situation like this before, and now, more than ever, he feared for her safety. What do we do now? He asked. Alara's expression was hard to read. She hesitated before answering, her gaze focused on the village below. We go to my father, she said, her voice filled with determination. He is the chief, and he will know how to protect us. But it won't be easy. The thought of facing her father, the very man who had once been so powerful, made Ethan uneasy. He had no idea what kind of reception they would receive. Would Alara's father welcome her back, or would he blame her for the turmoil that had followed her? With no more words, they continued their descent toward the village. As they entered the village, Ethan couldn't help but notice the watchful eyes of the people around them. The warriors standing tall near the fires, the elders gathered in quiet conversation. It all seemed so different from the peaceful life he had known on his ranch. When they reached the center of the village, Alara led him to a large, circular structure, its walls made of stone and wood, decorated with intricate carvings of animals and symbols. The door was heavy, made of thick wooden beams, and as Alara pushed it open, they were met by a scene that sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Her father, a tall man with graying hair and a stern face, was sitting at the far end of the room. His presence commanded attention, and the silence in the room grew heavier as they entered. Alara stepped forward, her posture straight, and Ethan followed closely behind. Father, she said, her voice carrying both respect and hesitation. I have returned. The chief's eyes flicked to her, and for a long moment, he said nothing. The room was tense, the weight of the moment hanging in the air like a storm about to break. Ethan could feel the eyes of the warriors on him, but he kept his gaze steady, his hand never far from the rifle slung across his back. Finally, the chief spoke. You return now, after all this time, he said, his voice deep and commanding. What is it that you seek, daughter? And why bring this man into our midst? Alara took a deep breath, her eyes steady as she faced her father. I seek protection, father, she said, her voice unwavering. And I bring him because he is the one who saved me. He risked everything to help me. I owe him my life. The chief's eyes shifted toward Ethan, studying him carefully. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the chief gave a single nod. You are a brave man, he said. But bravery alone does not earn trust. You will prove your worth here. Ethan felt the tension in the room ease slightly, but he knew the real challenge had only just begun. This was just the beginning of a long road ahead, and whatever came next, he had to be ready. The tension in the room was palpable as Ethan stood before Alara's father, the chief. The warriors around them shifted slightly, their eyes never leaving him. Ethan had faced danger before, but never anything like this. This was more than just a fight for survival. It was a test of character, of honor, and of what he was willing to risk for someone he barely knew. Alara stood by his side, her presence both a comfort and a reminder of the weight of the situation. Her father's eyes were intense, like a hawk sizing up its prey, but there was something else there too, an undeniable sense of authority and responsibility. You say you saved her. The chief finally spoke, his voice a deep rumble that echoed through the room. But what are you truly after, farmer? Do you seek riches? Power? Or is it your own life you value above all else? Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. I seek nothing but the safety of this woman, he said, glancing at Alara. I owe her my life, and I will protect her for as long as I can. The chief studied him, silent for what seemed like an eternity. Then he nodded once, slowly. Your words are those of a man who has not known the weight of real sacrifice, the chief said. But perhaps you are not as naive as you appear. We shall see. The chief stood up, his powerful frame towering over them. You will prove yourself worthy of our trust, if you can. But know this, if you fail, the consequences will be dire. For you, and for her. Ethan nodded, his mind racing. The chief's words were a warning, but they were also a challenge. It was clear that nothing would be handed to him easily. He would have to earn their respect. The chief motioned for the warriors to step forward. Take him to the trial grounds, he ordered. Ethan's stomach dropped. He had heard stories of the tribe's trials, of tests that pushed men. to their limits. He had no idea what was in store for him, but one thing was certain. He would have to face it, whether he was ready or not. As they walked through the village, Ethan's senses were overwhelmed. The village was alive with energy. The smell of food, the sound of laughter, the sight of children playing in the dirt. All of it was so different from the quiet solitude of his farm. But the feeling of unease remained. The warriors led him to a clearing at the edge of the village. The ground was packed hard, and there were large stones placed in a circle, marking the trial area. Ethan's heart pounded as he looked around. The chief's eyes were upon him, sharp and watchful, as if daring him to fail. "The trial is simple," the chief said, his voice booming. "You will face one of our warriors. Defeat him, and you will have earned our trust. Fail, and you will pay the price for your incompetence." Ethan swallowed hard. He had never fought a warrior before. Sure, he had worked the land, wrestled with animals, and fought off thieves in the past, but nothing like this. The warrior who stepped forward was a giant of a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his face marked with tribal paint. His eyes locked onto Ethan with an intensity that made him feel small in comparison. The warrior cracked his knuckles, clearly confident in his own strength. Ethan's hands were clammy, but he steadied himself. He had no choice. He had to fight. The battle began in a blur. The warrior charged at him, moving with the speed and power of a seasoned fighter. Ethan barely managed to dodge the first strike, the air whooshing past him as the warrior's fist missed his face by mere inches. He stumbled back, his heart racing. The warrior came at him again, this time swinging a large wooden staff with deadly precision. Ethan managed to block the first blow, but the force behind it sent him crashing to the ground. Pain shot through his side, but he ignored it, scrambling to his feet. He couldn't give up now. As the warrior moved in for another strike, Ethan remembered the one thing that had kept him going through all his struggles, the will to survive. With a burst of adrenaline, he lunged forward, grabbing the warrior's staff and using his opponent's momentum against him. The move was clumsy, but it worked. The warrior lost his balance, and Ethan managed to land a solid punch to his stomach. The warrior grunted but quickly regained his footing. The fight continued, and with each blow, Ethan's confidence grew. He wasn't as skilled as the warrior, but he was determined. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the warrior stepped back, breathing heavily. "Enough," he said, his voice grudgingly impressed. "You have proven your strength. But this is not enough to earn our trust. There is more you must prove." Ethan stood, panting, his body aching. He had survived the trial, but he knew it was just the beginning. The chief's gaze was still sharp, watching him closely. "You've earned your place here, for now," the chief said, his voice low and commanding. "But remember this, one test is not enough. There will be more, and you must prove yourself again and again. Only then will you be worthy of what you seek." Ethan nodded, exhausted but resolute. The path ahead was uncertain, and the challenges would only grow harder. But for Alara, he would face whatever came next. The days that followed were filled with challenges that tested Ethan in ways he never imagined. After passing the physical trial, he thought the worst was behind him. But he soon realized that the real test had only just begun. Alara's father, the chief, had promised that Ethan's place in their tribe would be earned, and it would not be a simple task. Each day, Ethan was given new tasks to prove his worth, and each task was more demanding than the last. At first, it seemed like routine work, hauling water, helping repair fences, and assisting with the tribe's livestock. But the true nature of the trials became clear as time went on. Ethan was being pushed not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. He had to prove that he understood the ways of the tribe, that he respected their culture, and that he could contribute to their survival. One afternoon, as the sun began to set and the sky turned a brilliant shade of orange, the chief called Ethan to his tent. Alara was by his side, her face set with a mix of anticipation and concern. "You have done well so far," the chief said, his voice grave. "But there is one final task that awaits you. It will test your loyalty and your ability to lead." Ethan stood tall, though inside, a knot of unease began to form. "What is it?" he asked. The chief's eyes narrowed. "The tribe has been at war with a rival clan for many moons. The battle has taken a toll on our people, and we are on the brink of losing our land. You will lead a small group of warriors to raid their camp. We need to show them that we will not be intimidated." Ethan's heart raced. This was no simple trial. This was a battle, something far more dangerous than any test of strength he had faced. He looked at Alara, her face pale, her eyes filled with worry. She seemed to sense his fear. "Father believes you can do this," she said softly, her voice steady but filled with an emotion Ethan could not place. "You've proven yourself in every other way. Now you must prove your loyalty to us, to the tribe, and to me." Her words hit him like a wave, crashing over him with a force he hadn't expected. This was more than just about survival. This was about standing up for everything Alara had lost, everything she was fighting for. Ethan's stomach churned, but there was no turning back. He had come this far, and if he was to earn his place in this tribe, he had to do this. He had to fight. The next morning, Ethan set out with a group of 10 warriors, each one armed and prepared for the battle ahead. The journey to the rival clan's camp was treacherous, taking them through dense forests and rocky terrain. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the only sounds were the crunch of their footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Ethan's thoughts were consumed with the upcoming raid. He had fought in skirmishes before, but this was different. He wasn't just protecting himself or Alara anymore. This was about proving himself to a tribe that had given him a chance when no one else would. As they neared the rival camp, Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He could hear the sounds of voices, low murmurs, the crackle of a fire. The warriors around him were silent, their faces painted with war markings, their eyes cold with determination. Ethan swallowed hard, his grip tightening on the weapon he carried. They moved swiftly and quietly, their steps synchronized, their mission clear. As they reached the edge of the camp, the chief's warriors signaled for them to halt. They were close now, so close Ethan could see the enemy warriors gathered around their fire, their weapons resting beside them. The tension in the air was electric. Ethan's breath came in shallow gasps as he crouched low to the ground, signaling his men to stay still. They waited for the right moment, the perfect opening. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours. Then, with a sharp motion, the chief's warriors sprang into action. The battle was swift, brutal, and chaotic. Ethan found himself face to face with one of the enemy warriors, a tall man with dark eyes and a cruel grin. The man charged at him, his weapon raised high. Ethan ducked just in time, the blade narrowly missing him. With a surge of adrenaline, Ethan swung his own weapon, landing a blow that sent the man sprawling to the ground. The battle raged on around him, but Ethan remained focused. He had a job to do, and he wasn't about to fail now. When the dust settled and the smoke cleared, the rival clan was defeated. Their camp lay in ruins, and the warriors who had attacked them were either dead or captured. Ethan stood among his men, panting, covered in dirt and sweat, but victorious. His heart was still racing, but there was a strange sense of pride that filled him. He had done it. He had proven himself to the tribe. When they returned to Alara's village, the chief greeted them with solemn approval. He nodded toward Ethan, his expression unreadable. "You have done what was asked of you," he said, his voice deep and steady. "You have earned your place among us." Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had done it. But even as the tribe celebrated their victory, Ethan knew this was only the beginning. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. The challenges ahead would be even greater. And no matter what, he would stand by Alara, ready to face whatever came next. The days following the victory were filled with a mix of celebration and tension. The village had suffered for so long, and now there was a sense of relief, a brief moment where the tribe could enjoy the fruits of their labor and their hard-won peace. But for Ethan, the reality of their situation was never far from his mind. Alara's people had won a battle, but they had not won the war. The rival clan might have been defeated, but there were still others who posed a threat. The chief's words echoed in Ethan's mind. This is not the end. He knew there would be more battles to fight. As the sun set each evening, casting a warm golden light over the village, Ethan found himself wandering the camp, thinking about what had happened and what would come next. He had proven his strength in battle, but now he had to prove his loyalty once again. Alara noticed his restlessness. "You've done what they asked of you," she said one evening as they sat by the fire. "Why do you still worry?" Ethan looked at her, his brow furrowed. "It's not over, Alara. This victory, it's just a small part of a bigger fight. I can't help but feel like something worse is coming." Ilara's gaze softened. She understood the weight of his words. You're right, but we can only fight what's in front of us. We can't control everything. The chief knows what he's doing. Ethan nodded, though he wasn't entirely convinced. The chief, despite his wisdom and power, had his own struggles. The tribe's enemies were numerous, and there were always those who sought to take what they had worked so hard to build. As the days wore on, Ethan and Ilara spent more time together, discussing everything from the future of her tribe to the simple joys of life. It was in these quiet moments that Ethan began to realize just how deeply he had grown to care for her. She wasn't just a princess, a woman to be protected. She was someone who shared his struggles, his hopes, and his fears. But even as they grew closer, there was a growing sense of unease in the air. One afternoon, word came from the chief that a messenger from the rival clan had arrived. Ethan's heart sank when he heard the news. The rival clan had not been fully defeated, and they had sent a representative to demand terms. The chief called for a council meeting. Ethan accompanied Ilara to the council, where the leaders of the tribe were gathered in a large tent. The chief was seated at the head of the table, his expression stern. The rival clan's messenger was a tall man, with sharp features and cold eyes. He wore a cloak made of animal fur, and his presence seemed to fill the room with an almost palpable sense of danger. The clan demands retribution for your actions, the messenger said, his voice steady and unwavering. You have killed many of our warriors. This will not go unanswered. The chief stood, his towering figure casting a shadow over the table. We have defended our land and our people, he said, his voice calm but filled with authority. We will not be intimidated by threats. If your clan seeks war, then war it shall be. The messenger's eyes narrowed, but he did not respond. He simply turned and left the tent, his presence lingering long after he was gone. The council was silent for a long moment. Ethan could feel the tension in the room. The chief's decision had been made, and the tribe was preparing for the inevitable. We will fight, the chief finally said, his voice steady. But we will not fight blindly. We must be smart. Ethan, he turned to Ethan, his eyes sharp. You have proven yourself in battle, but now, you must help us lead. You know the land. You know the people. You will help us plan. Ethan's heart pounded. He had never been a leader, never seen himself as one. But the chief's words carried weight, and he knew there was no turning back. The tribe's survival depended on every decision they made in the coming days. I will do what I can, Ethan said, his voice firm despite the nervousness that gripped him. As the days passed, the village began to prepare for the war that was fast approaching. Warriors sharpened their weapons, repaired their armor, and trained for what lay ahead. Ilara, though she had her own responsibilities to tend to, spent as much time as she could with Ethan, offering support and encouragement. The bond between them deepened with every passing day, and though their situation was dire, there was a quiet strength in the way they faced the challenges ahead. One night, as they sat under the stars, Ilara leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder. We've come so far, haven't we? She said softly. Ethan wrapped his arm around her. We have, he replied. But the road ahead is still long, and we don't know what it holds. Ilara smiled, her eyes bright despite the uncertainty. Whatever comes, we face it together. Ethan nodded, knowing that she was right. The future was uncertain, but as long as they had each other, they would face whatever challenges came their way. Together, they would fight for her people, for their future, and for the love that had slowly blossomed between them. The next day, the rival clan's threat loomed closer, but Ethan was ready. No matter what happened, he would not back down. He had made a promise to protect Ilara, and he intended to keep it. The days that followed were filled with the anticipation of battle. The warriors of the tribe trained harder than ever, sharpening their skills, while Ethan, now a trusted member of the tribe, worked alongside them, preparing for the coming war. The rival clan was not far off, and every night, the village could hear the faint sound of drums in the distance, a constant reminder that war was on the horizon. Ilara remained by his side through it all, her presence a source of comfort and strength. She had come so far from the woman who had first arrived at Ethan's farm, weak and alone. Now, she was the daughter of a chief, ready to lead her people, but she was still a woman fighting for what was right. Her courage fueled Ethan's own determination. One afternoon, as they stood together overlooking the village, Ilara spoke. We cannot keep living in fear, she said, her voice strong but tinged with sadness. My people have fought for generations to protect their land. We will not let it fall now. Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. I won't let them take it from you, he said, his voice steady. They knew that the upcoming battle would be brutal. The rival clan had always been ruthless, and they would stop at nothing to destroy Alara's tribe. But Ethan had fought before, and he had learned that sometimes survival meant fighting for what mattered most, even if it seemed impossible. The night before the battle, the village gathered around the fire for a final council. The chief spoke of strategy, of the strength of their warriors, and of the importance of standing together. Ethan was chosen to lead a group of warriors alongside Alara, who would fight by his side. As the fire flickered and the shadows danced around them, Alara placed a hand on Ethan's arm, a quiet gesture of solidarity. We will fight together, she said softly, her gaze unwavering. For our people, for our future. Ethan looked into her eyes and nodded. The moment they had prepared for was finally upon them. The air was thick with the tension of what was to come, but there was also a sense of unity. They were no longer just two individuals. They were part of something much greater than themselves. The following morning, as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the warriors set out for the battlefield. The tribe's war drums began to beat, a rhythmic sound that echoed through the hills. Ethan and Alara rode at the front of the group, their horses galloping at full speed toward the rival clan's stronghold. The landscape around them blurred as they rode, the wind rushing past them, the sound of hooves pounding the earth. As they approached the enemy camp, the smell of smoke and the sounds of shouting filled the air. The rival clan was ready for them. Ethan's heart raced as he dismounted, gripping his weapon tightly. He turned to Alara, who was already in position, her face set with determination. Stay close, he said, his voice low but firm. She gave him a quick nod before leading her own warriors into position. The battle began with a fierce clash of steel and cries of anger. Ethan fought alongside Alara's warriors, each swing of his weapon driven by the need to protect her, to protect everything they had worked for. The enemy was relentless, but so were they. Ethan fought like a man possessed, pushing forward with every ounce of strength he had. The warriors fought with the fury of those who had everything to lose, and the rival clan began to retreat. But the battle was far from over. Ethan saw the leader of the rival clan, a tall man with scars across his face, coming toward him. There was no hesitation in the man's eyes. He knew who Ethan was, and had been waiting for this moment. Ethan's heart pounded as he faced the man, the final confrontation. That would decide everything. The leader swung his sword at Ethan, aiming for his chest. Ethan ducked just in time, feeling the blade was by his ear. With a swift motion, he countered, landing a blow to the man's side. The leader grunted in pain, but didn't fall. The two of them circled each other, each waiting for an opening. Then, with a flash of movement, the man lunged, but Ethan was ready. He sidestepped, grabbing the man's arm and twisting it behind his back. The leader stumbled, and with a final move, Ethan disarmed him, knocking the sword from his hand. The leader fell to his knees, defeated. Ethan stood over him, panting, his weapon ready. It's over, Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with exhaustion. The man glared up at him, blood dripping from his wounds. You think this is over? He spat, but Ethan didn't respond. He had done what he needed to do. The rival clan was broken, their leader defeated. As the dust settled, the warriors of the tribe gathered around, their faces weary but triumphant. The battle had been hard fought, but they had won. Ethan looked around at the faces of the warriors who had fought beside him, and then his eyes found Alara. She was standing at the center of the group, her face shining with pride, but there was a sadness in her eyes. This victory had come at a cost, and though they had won the battle, the war was far from over. But for now, they had secured their future, and that was enough. The days that followed the victory were filled with both celebration and reflection. The tribe had won, but the cost of that victory weighed heavily on everyone. The rival clan had been defeated, but there were still enemies in the shadows, and the future of the tribe remained uncertain. Alara stood by Ethan's side, her presence a constant source of strength and resolve. Together, they had faced the hardest of challenges and had come out victorious. But there was something deeper in her eyes, a quiet sorrow, as though the battle was not truly over for her, not yet. She had led her people to this moment, but the scars of the past still haunted her. Ethan understood that. He had seen the way she carried herself, always strong, always unyielding. But he had also seen the cracks in her armor, the moments of vulnerability when the weight of leadership and the loss of her family took their toll. One evening, as the village celebrated their hard-earned victory, Alara took Ethan aside. They walked away from the revelry, the sounds of music and laughter fading into the background. She led him to the edge of a cliff overlooking the valley below. The sky was painted in hues of purple and orange as the sun began to set. It was a peaceful sight, but the stillness was bittersweet. "I never imagined I would come back here," Alara said, her voice low, almost a whisper. Ethan stood beside her, watching the horizon. "You've fought for this land, for your people," he said softly. "You've done more than most could ever hope to." Alara nodded, her eyes distant. "I thought that by returning, I would find peace. But I realize now that peace isn't something you can simply take back. It's something that must be earned, and the price of that is always higher than you expect." Ethan turned to her, his heart heavy with the realization that she had carried this burden alone for so long. "You don't have to do it alone anymore," he said, his voice firm. Alara looked at him, her eyes searching his face. For a moment, there was silence between them, a quiet understanding passing through the space. Then, she smiled, a rare and genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I never thought I would find someone like you," she said, her voice soft with emotion. Ethan reached for her hand, holding it gently. "You don't have to," he said. "I'm here, and I'll be here for as long as you need me." They stood together in silence, watching the sun dip below the horizon, both of them lost in their thoughts. The journey they had been on had changed them both. Ethan had found a purpose beyond his farm, and Alara had found someone who would stand beside her, not just as a protector, but as a partner. But even as they shared this moment of peace, the future loomed large. The chief had already spoken of more trials to come, of more battles they would have to fight, and the thought of that weighed heavily on their hearts. But for that moment, it didn't matter. For the first time in a long while, they felt like they could breathe again, like they had finally found something worth fighting for. As the night wore on, the celebration in the village grew louder, and the tribe gathered around the fire. Ethan and Alara joined them, sitting side by side, their hands still intertwined. The firelight flickered in the darkness, casting shadows that danced like ghosts around them. The sound of drums filled the air, and the warriors began to chant, their voices rising in unity. It was a song of victory, of strength, and of the promise that, no matter what came next, they would face it together. And as they sat there, surrounded by the people they had fought for, Ethan knew that no matter what the future held, he would never face it alone. The path ahead would be difficult, but with Alara by his side, he was ready to face whatever came their way. Together, they would rebuild, they would heal, and they would find the peace that had eluded them for so long. They were no longer just a farmer and a princess. They were a team, bound by love and loyalty, ready to face whatever challenges life had to offer.